I will start with a brief formal discourse to welcome good afternoon for all. I hope the lunch was your liking. My name is Luís Gomes from University of Açores, and as organizer of the Açores Scientific Workplace Meets Artificial Intelligence, I would like to wish you welcome. I would like also to say that this is a special meeting included in EPIA 2013. Third, the satellite event challenges, which is a novelty in the previous or past editions of EPIA. Foremost, let me introduce our guests sitting on this table. Dr. João Gregório, the representative of the Regional Secretariat of Education, Science and Culture from Government of Açores, which I invite to chair this welcome with me. Professor Helder Coelho, our chairman from Laboratory of Agent Modeling of University of Lisbon. Professor João Luís Gaspar, from Center of Information and Seismovolcanic Surveillance of the Azores, CIVISA, and Center for Volcanologic and Geological Risks Assessment, SVARG. Professor Paulo Borges, from Azorian's Biodiversity Group, CITA-A, and Professor Guy Menezes from IMAR, Institute of Marine Research. To my regret, I have to announce that Professor António Gomes Menezes from the Center of Applied Economic Studies of the Atlantic, CEPLA, and SATA, the Azores Airline Company, would not be present to a last-minute professional commitment. He is the CEO, you know. Thank you for accepting my invitation. The main objective of this meeting is to provide a meeting point between researchers of some research units based in the University of Açores from different scientific areas, namely volcanology, seismology, economics, biodiversity, and oceanography, with the participations of EPIA 2013. Our expectation is to provoke confluences between scientific fields and artificial intelligence to evaluate, validate, and leverage for each confluence their applicability and power in solving problems. All our guests have expressed much interest in this meeting when I invited them. I strongly believe that this interest has to do with the perception that artificial intelligence can help them to better understand their problems and to participate and innovate in their solutions. From them, we expect that they bring forward what they do, how they do, and their suggestions on how and when the artificial intelligence can be framed and useful in some of their daily scientific works. From the audience, we expect to get questions, suggestions, comments, and so on, in order to better understand in what extent artificial intelligence can help them. I hope you enjoy and feel free to engage in our discussion. Thank you for coming.
Muito boa tarde, eu vou falar em português, peço desculpa, depois podemos, os colegas podem aqui transmitir um pouco a mensagem. Estou aqui em representação do Sr. Secretário Regional de Educação, Ciência e Cultura, que por motivos de agenda não pôde estar presente, e é com um grande prazer que estou aqui nesta mesa e junto de investigadores regionais que conheço e que fazem investigação de excelência. Este evento aborda um tema científico que, pela sua própria natureza, potencia a inovação, a transferência do conhecimento e orienta-se de uma forma inteligente, artificial e muito real para a criação de novo conhecimento com forte vertente de aplicação prática, no sentido de poder dar respostas aos desafios da nossa sociedade. É, pois, uma temática científica que, pela sua especificidade, amplitude e potencialidade, posiciona-se de uma forma muito particular na resposta às orientações enquadradas nas políticas regionais, nacionais e nas estratégias de crescimento a nível da União Europeia, designadamente da Estratégia Europa 2020. Por outro lado, este encontro, dando a conhecer a investigação que se faz na região, as suas áreas de interesse prioritárias e as suas especificidades, também projeta internacionalmente essa mesma investigação e também poderá contribuir para a resolução de problemas e necessidades locais, recorrendo a soluções de alguma forma ligadas à inteligência artificial. Finalmente, este encontro desenvolve também, certamente, uma outra inteligência, a emocional, já que permite partilhar não só o conhecimento, mas também as sensibilidades, as motivações, potenciando como se deseja eventuais parcerias e cooperação entre os investigadores de cá e os de fora. Portanto, só em nome da Secretaria Regional de Educação, Ciência e Cultura e no âmbito das suas competências e através do seu sistema de incentivos, não deixará de acarinhar a organização de reuniões desta importância e, portanto, se empenhar em corresponder na medida das suas possibilidades às solicitações dos investigadores. Portanto, um agradecimento especial a toda a organização deste evento e particularmente à organização local deste evento. Muito obrigado.
Next, we have Professor Hélder Coelho, University of Lisbon, with a speech or intervention, the importance and impact of artificial intelligence in regional, national and international contests. Thank you.
Now with AI, very briefly, and try to connect AI to the next talks. This morning we tried to see the interaction of disciplines with AI, from AI to the disciplines, and the other way around. Now I would try to make clear that in 2013, 57 years after the birth of AI in the United States, in Dartmouth, in a workshop, a summer workshop in August, conducted by and with the participation of 10 big players of the future AI after that meeting. This is done in a context where we get computing now as a very important domain of science. AI is inside computing science. If we see these 57 years, we can understand why in the last years the success of commercial products like Siri in iPhone, or the Watson from IBM, or even the Curiosity rover in Mars can explain the attack that in recent years AI has done on complexity, on uncertainty, on incompleteness, and the techniques, the last techniques, the improvement of all techniques are on these three tracks, but also on the support of creativity and innovation, and that is quite important. If I can isolate as examples three cognitive and very hot tasks, cognitive tasks, I would say that vision, natural language understanding, and real-world reasoning are now very hot. And if we observe the last conference on AI, mainly this one conference in August in Beijing, in China, where we can find that there is a stability on the importance of the areas. The big one is machine learning. The second one is knowledge and reasoning. The third one is agents. And that means that for the last years, I would say more than a decade, these three areas are always on the three places, the three top places, and sometimes agents is in second and changes with the others. Looking to some brief description of what is the meaning of these tasks, I would say that there is the attack on very complex problems with a very huge success, even in an area like machine translation, where there was always a very big difficulty because there is natural language behind, and the processing is not very simple. If I can isolate as a simple example what is the image of cutting-edge research, like recognizing birds in image, identify image that match simple phrases, co-reference resolution, a task in natural language understanding, event extraction, for instance, this sentence, and we can now not only make this sentence understandable, but identify the main points in the sentence and check what is the performance that our systems can achieve. We get a lot of techniques. Mainly, we get multiple representations, and our systems can face this diversity of representations. For instance, when we attack common sense with a system like Psi, it's a commercial system, we can see that it is necessary to cover the English language and a huge database and a huge knowledge base with different representations. Also, diversity of thinking. That means that the systems can not only do, as before, some deduction, but can do some prediction, can reflect, can select, can have values to help to have some preference. Watson does this with the success that meant to be a champion against two humans, two winners of the Jeopardy game. And that means that in AI, from the start, we get always different disciplines, dialoguing different disciplines, points of view with interconnections, and that means that we can, in brief, look to what are the big words, and as I said, reasoning is a big word, recognition is a big word, also in the scientists, the late Simon and the late Newell were the big scientists from the beginning, 1956. Looking also to what is achieved, we see a connection of several areas, not only computer science, but complexity science and neuroscience. And that means that the intelligence idea, the intelligence meaning that from the beginning we start to attack is now also associated with the complex space that we have when we face problem solving. We know how this complex intelligence is built. We know how we can also increase this space where we can, with search techniques, navigate and with reasoning deal with. If we select several areas and several bets of AI in recent years, we can say that the need to talk about general intelligence is now a must. Deep learning is connected with big data, and is one of the bets of Google research, using neural nets and statistics. Usable AI is also a must. That means that we want to face difficult applications and use our knowledge. That effort was done in the 80s, but it was not the good moment. The techniques were not well developed, and now we get that near us. Also, what we call now mechanism design, that means that we can go from AI to biology and to neurology and find the mechanisms and also try to find the drugs and help healthcare. Also, not only man-machine interaction, but human-agent interaction, different sort of interaction. And finally, the hot, very hot area, game theory, with a direct connection with sustainability, with security, with safety, and a very nice couple of applications that are now in use in a port, in Boston Port, or in Los Angeles Airport. These hot topics are connected with some openness of the space of problems, but also to some big interests and some usability of the list of things that we can select. Say disaster management is a big one. If we look to the August months and to Portugal with the fires, intelligence and security is elsewhere. Smart simulation and modeling of complex systems is around our financial crisis. Text analysis, sentiment analysis, and opinion mining is also very important. But we can go from economy to bioinformatics, to healthcare, to drugs, and see how we can now face very difficult illness, like I said in the morning, cancer. It's not a trivial one. It's not like flu. It's very complex. It is different from one person to the other. The complexity of the body of that person is very important, not only to the symptoms, but also to the therapies. And that means also that we get a lot of disciplines that must work together and a lot of frontiers where we can struggle to get solutions and to find better ways to live in Earth and to survive. It's not only bioinformatics. We can go to education and see how AI is behind MOOCs, how we can face the techniques that are important to support a different way of do education, using technology and exploring that technology. Also to go to personalized education, and that means to have ideas, to use those ideas, and that means not only to give knowledge, to give data, to help persons, but also to do the evaluation, to do the prediction of the performance, and to help the professionals like teachers in helping also the students. And that was all that I would like to present to you in order to do some context for our colleagues that are going now to present some points of view from Açores. Paulo Borges, please.
I will try to present 4 lines of research in which there could be some good ways of collaborating between biology, ecology, and AI. Okay. Onde é que puseste, Pedro? Aqui. Aqui. This talk is based on a collaboration between several members of the Azorean Biodiversity Group. I will try to talk in 4 different topics. The first one is related with modeling the abundance of plants and animals in space and time, recognizing that 2 key variables in modeling ecological patterns in species are their distribution and abundance in space, with important implications in applied ecology like conservation science. Of course, that the study of these 2 variables is complex because species vary in space and time, and nowadays with the global changes we need to have real answers to solve problems in related with conservation of biodiversity. Another aspect that is important to recognize is that usually is more easy to obtain data on the distribution of a species, but to obtain that on abundance of a particular species is more difficult, because abundance usually varies more in time. Consequently, two of the aspects we are dealing are called the Wallacean shortfall and the Precian shortfall, that are related with the difficulty of obtaining these two kinds of information. In practice, we need to recognize that knowing the distribution of species and their rarity patterns are real problems in biology. Species vary in their abundance. That is, that we have usually some species that are particularly common, and many times a high proportion of species that are particularly rare with lower abundance. This is the rank of species. This is the most common species. This is the most rare species here in this plot. And another interesting aspect is that different kind of species, endemics, natives, exotics, single island endemic species that occur in only one island, for instance, vary in their statistical structure of the distribution of their abundances. Another aspect that we should take into consideration is that species have different dispersal abilities. Therefore, we have to take into consideration their ability to disperse in space. Consequently, if we compare the dispersal ability, we can have completely different model distributions of abundance, like this for high dispersal ability species, or this more complex model distribution for low dispersal ability species that have aggregation patterns. And consequently, in models, we have to include these traits of species there, as an example here, their dispersal ability. We tried before to use some kind of this kind of informations to using joining different models to try to relate abundance with distribution. We were kind of successful in using these models for the Azores, showing, for instance, that these rare species, these endemic species occurs in less spaces, less area than expected by their abundance, and this could be useful finding outliers in these models. But another area probably more related here with our audience is the use of neural networks to predict, to use the local probability of occurrence of a species with its abundance. And we tried to apply this in this publication is from 2009, and we were not particularly very successful in relating presence-absence data with with abundance estimates for a particular place. If we were able to say, well, based on the probability of occurrence of a species, we can expect in that place find a particular abundance of that species, this could be very good for modeling the spread of invasive species or other kind of species. But in this particular paper, we were not very successful. We used this kind of structured neural networks, but we hope in future to improve this kind of models. Another area that could be interesting is the modeling of spread of invasive species that unfortunately in the Azores we have some very bad situations with invasive taxa. These eventually will be more serious in the future with some plants, and also the rat problem is a health problem also in the Azores. And this is probably the most serious plant for the future of native forests in the Azores, and it will be very important to model their spread in space and time with different ecological conditions in the Azores and find ways also of control it. One possibility is using genetic algorithms, GARP, that is being used elsewhere for modeling ecological niche of invasive species in other archipelagos, and we hope that someone could use it also to model these species. Another case is urban termites, in which we have in our group now collaboration with colleagues in mathematics and also José Cascar here leading this conference using agent-based modeling approach. Termites is a huge economic problem in the Azores with impressive economic impact, destroying the houses. And one of my students that will present this talk Thursday, I think, he will give more details, but we were successful in predicting some areas of spread of the termite in Angra do Heroísmo with this cellular automata model. And now we are moving to agent-based modeling, where we want to include information on the environment of the termite, the biology of the termite, the ways people think about the problem, and control measures to be used in Angra do Heroísmo. The third topic I want to present is being led by Pedro Cardoso, is related with the ways we can estimate the number of species in a particular area. I showed before that usually in natural communities we have many, each point here is an individual, each color is a different species. Usually we have many rare species and few common species. And these individuals are usually spread in space. They can be more aggregated or more randomly distributed in space. And usually what we ecologists, is to sample a fraction of the meta-community. In this case, if we sample this part of the meta-community, we are sampling 2 species. If we had another sample, we had in this situation 2 more different species. And if we add a third sampling, we can have another species, and we start creating a accumulation curve where we include samples and we are adding species. Usually, what is the problem? The problem is that it's impossible many times to reach the real complete survey, because we cannot go to the field, and we do not have time and human resources to sample everything. Therefore, we have to rely on incomplete sampling. And how we can be sure that our incomplete sampling could be good enough to reach a situation of perfect sampling. Usually, ecologists design estimators like these estimators, is chow, where we have the number of species we collected and two parameters, in this case the number of species with one individual and two individuals. But usually these estimators do not reach the ideal situation where we want to know the real number of species. Pedro Cardoso came up with a possible solution that using genetic algorithms in which we could try to design different formulas and putting a machine working for us, a computer working for us, and design the best formula. He reached to new estimators like those, in which, looking for data for Madagascar, the new estimators perform better than the traditional estimators. I think Pedro could say that we are in a good way, but of course we have to improve these kind of methods. Therefore, what Pedro is looking is for better data sets and see if the formulas can have some ecological meaning. And looking for automation, ways of improve this kind of process in and with lower computer time. The fourth aspect I want to present is related with the ways we can describe the growing of diversity, the explanation of how diversity could be described based on the ways islands vary in their topography with time. It should be recognized that island like Pico Island in the Azores, a very recent island, have a complex, different topography of a more older, mature island, and this is a time problem that is difficult to deal in ecology because we now we live in a very small time frame, and we have to try to understand how life evolved in these islands through geological time. There is a recent model, the general dynamic model proposed by Robert Whittaker and Kostas Triantis, one of our postdocs recently worked with us recently in the Azores, in which they showed an interesting aspect is that with time, this is geological time, the ecological capacity of the islands is growing. Consequently, the number of species that could speciate and appear in the islands also increase with time, with the ecological opportunities. But at the same point, islands start to have lower area due to erosion, and also the ecological capacity of those islands decrease. And the what we want to try to do with these models is try to understand how oceanic islands have, based on the fact that oceanic islands have a typical development life cycle, how this could be translated in terms of the abundance and diversity of life in these islands through time. This is a very complex situation, implies mathematical simulations, try to simulate mathematically the speciation process, that is a difficult thing, and implies also a huge amount of computing time, and not only the mathematical problem, but also computation problem. We want to eventually import some aspects of artificial intelligence to help in this mathematical and computation problem. Thank you.
Next talk is by Inês. It's on the fish size.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation for this conference. My area of expertise is marine biology and ecology, fisheries, deep water fishes, seamounts ecology. But today I will talk about an idea that I have some years ago, which is related with the data we collect daily for make fish stock assessment, which is a complex problem. Stock assessment itself is complex in marine science, and the quality of the data we collect is essential for a good advice for management of the fisheries in general. Most of the problems we have in marine ecology are similar to those that my colleague Paul Borges already talked. In marine biology, most of the time we have an additional problem that we must use more difficult sampling methods to get robust results. I will first talk about put in context what is the problem. In fish stock assessment, one of the key data is the size of the fish that the fisherman caught and land. And most of all with this data, because the assessment models are most of them are demographic models, we use the sizes, and from the sizes we get the age of the fishes, and then we include this data into the assessment, fish stock assessment models. In the end, our answer will be an estimate of the number of fish that there are at sea, that we estimate there are at sea, and how many can we catch. Sustainability, of course. Also to put in context, almost all developed countries have their own sampling programs of basic data from fisheries. In particular, at the present, at the level of EU, these programs are organized more or less in common. Each country has their own program, and it is financed about 50% by the European Union and the other 50% of the member states. In the United States, for example, most of the work of sampling the basic data for fish assessment is made by private companies. In Europe, it's most state institutes that do this work. I will talk about a very particular and very punctual data that we collect. We collect a lot of other data, biological, fishing effort, etc. But this particular data of fish sizes is very important for the most robust assessment models. And nowadays, everywhere is made by hand. Let's say we have samples spread in the main ports of landing of the fish. The measure is manual. We use rulers, paper forms, etc., voice records. We only cover, due to the, it's very expensive to cover all, and we need also to get, we only need to get a representative sample of the sizes. We don't cover all the ports, and not all the species that are landed are able to be sampled. Also in the traditional size sampling, from the data sheets that are collected by samplers on ports, this data must be put in databases, electronic databases, and at the level, these samples need to be verified, corrected. It's a very time-consuming process. Other problem, this method has a lot of disadvantages. And because you know better than me that for do a good sampling, we must accomplish many statistical assumptions of how we collect the sample, what is an ideal sample, the number of individuals we must measure, etc. And we must choose the boxes the boats to which will be sampled today, how many number of boxes of fish we will measure, how many fishes in each box we will measure, etc., etc. And in the end, most of the time, the quality of the data is not good, of course. So we have a problem of quality, we have a problem of quantity of the samples, of representativeness and accuracy of all the sampling. Many times it's not a problem of the samples of the people we have. It's because the time they have to do the sampling and the way or the things he must accomplish to get a representative sampling is very difficult to achieve. These programs of sampling also have the problems of coordinating. For example, in Azores, we have the islands spread and the fishing ports are spread for different islands, different geographies, etc. And it's very difficult to coordinate the people that do this, and have high costs. Sorry. Back. So the system I idealized some years ago, and I put in practice also already, and we developed a prototype with the help of some engineers. We think to use the vision technologies. What is the idea is to put cameras on the conveyor belts of the auction places. Most of the auction places today, I don't know if you visit the auction place today, everything is electronic. So it's easy to adapt a system with vision technologies to take images of the fishes, of the fish boxes. We developed a software. This is mainly a kind of stereo image to allow us to measure in the images the exact measure the fish has or any structure of the fish, and all these images can be archived in a data bank and analyzed a posteriori. We will develop this. We already have a prototype of the fixed system. We are developing, as you will see, portable system also to put on vessels or anything. So the idea is to put this inside the fishing vessels, the big fishing vessels, not only in the Azores, but everywhere, at least in Europe, that will take images of the fish that is caught, or in auction places, for example, and all these images will be transferred to a data bank and can be accessed from anywhere. From whom measures of the fish inside the boxes can be measured anywhere, and images can be acquired from anywhere too. So this will be a huge transformation on the data sampling. So this is another figure to resume what we envisage for this. We are in a process of developing. All this idea wins an award some years ago, and now we are developing this under a startup here in the Azores. So we will need cloud computing. We are preparing a database to organize all these archives, and the softwares also to measure is more or less developed. This is some examples of the prototype we developed at that time. This is an example. Of course, this is not a census, this is a sampling, but we can choose from all the universe, for example, of boxes that is land in the harbor. We can choose what we want to measure. Of course, if the fish is one in the top of the other, we have biometrical relations that we can relate, for example, the size of the pectoral fin with the total length. That is the measure that we are interested in. So we can measure the eyes, we can measure everything that is measurable, and we can convert to total length of any fish or any organism we are interested. We can use that measure. This is an example of garage. This is another example of another kind of boxes. This is another species, more species. And I can tell you that this is very easy to measure directly from these images. The learning time is very quick, and the quantity of lengths, of measurements that we can get in the computer is much, much more than any sample in any place. We can amplify if we want to see a particular structure, etc. Some examples. Okay, so the advantages, and we already test most of them, is to improve the quality and quantity of the size data and the coverage of the sampling programs. But priority and non-priority species, because the sampling programs divide the priority species, the most important, and non-priority, the images of all the species can be collected, and in the future we can return to the image bank and we can choose only those species that some years ago are not important. So we don't lose data. At this moment we are losing a lot of data that are species that we don't get any kind of data. And with the climate changes or with the market situations, those species can be important in the next future, and we have no past data to work. So there is also a more rigorous species identification. Some species are very similar, and there are also some errors there. This system can allow remote work and remote maintenance of the cameras on the harbors, etc. Remote management, and we can also select priorities of the species or ports or everything. We can measure the fish from my house or in India or everywhere with a comfortable way in the computer terminal and using the web. There is no much financial constraints. Several times these programs have financial constraints, and some data stop to be collected. With this system, images can be collected every time, no much costs. Technicians that are now making this manually can concentrate on other important tasks, more inquiries to the fleet, control the discards, or make more biological sampling. The fishes are not manipulated manually. This is not necessary. And the system is very simple and can be adapted to fishing vessels, to land, to portable, to iPads, etc. Well, this is some details of the system. I will pass this. This is an example, only one example. When we developed the prototype, and we make an experiment with the two systems running at the same time. This is 3 months of sampling in North Harbour of one species that is very complicated because the species is landed by size classes. and we must try to get a stratified sample by size classes, etc. So in terms of statistical, it's a complicated species, and this is the result we obtain. This is the traditional method. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. So if scientists get the data from the left to include in the assessment models, what we will get is that, for example, in December, that this species have a kind of recruitment. So a lot of juveniles will discard in this December month, which was not true. If we look to the right, using the fish matrix solution with vision, the sampling, the size structure of these 3 months are completely different from this. So there are a lot of errors here, and this affects a lot the assessment results in the end. This is only one example. We do this with several species, and of course the results were much better. So I will try to make you some statements only with how can this solution interfaces with the artificial intelligence. I speak by email with Luis for some ideas, and he gives me some clues. Oh, for this, probably this area of artificial intelligence is important, etc. So for us, the next challenges are identify the species automatically from the image. We do this several times, and with very simple algorithms of correlations, etc., of the color of the pixels, and we get about 80% of success. But we know that there are more powerful algorithms. For example, discriminant analysis could be a good methodology for doing this. If we identify the species from the image, this species can be cataloged automatically in the data bank. So, and this is something it's very important to get more time to measure the fish, for example. You can imagine that the number of images that will be archived will be huge. Nowadays, this is not much a problem with the capacity we have to save images, the capacity of archiving. But the problem will be sometimes how to organize this data bank. We are working on this with the help of some engineers also. So this is one of the challenges. Other challenge will be if we will have, for example, all the land boxes in the harbor, we must get some criteria to choose the boxes to measure. And this is more or less statistical problem. And we can, from the images, probably get some information to choose the number, to get somehow an algorithm that give us the boxes, the ideal number of boxes, or those boxes that we should measure. Probably vision technologies can help here on this. And of course, in the future, we will try, of course, to do all the measures automatically, not by hand on the computer. We do some trials with the eye of the fish because it's a circular, let's say, thing that easy to be identified. We have some success, but we want to go further and to try other kind of measures, pectoral fin, which is difficult, but we will try. Or the size of the head, something like that. If we could do this automatically, we will get a huge advance on all this system. So when I talk with Luis, he gives me some he gives me this kind of let's say areas of the artificial intelligence that can help on some of the problems we are facing and we will face in the future. For example, for automatical species classification, machine learning and data mining could be some could give us some answers for our problem. Pattern recognitions from pictures, these other neuronal networks, genetic algorithms, and fuzzy systems can also help to develop this. And of course, all the statistical treatment and inference from collected data. I don't know much about these things, but this you know more than me about this. You probably recognize these methodologies could help also to treat the data, the statistical data we will collect, and that's it. I finish.
Thank you. Next paper is on volcanoes.
Umas primeiras palavras só em português para agradecer à organização o convite para estar aqui presente, na pessoa do professor Luís, do Departamento de Matemática da Universidade dos Açores, e também ao Governo Regional, através da Secretaria Regional da Ciência, da Educação, Ciência e Cultura, pelo apoio que tem dado a este tipo de evento, e este em particular. Penso que é uma oportunidade única de pôr em contacto pessoas que de outra maneira não estariam certamente a conversar sobre estes assuntos. Good afternoon. In the next minutes, I will try to speak a little bit about volcanoes, volcanic activity in a quite special context, which is the context of the Azores archipelago. Of course, this idea was from Luís. He also came to us 2 or 3 months ago, trying to find out where artificial intelligence could be used to understand the volcano behavior and to help us to mitigate the risk. So this presentation will be in 2 parts. I will present the volcanological part, let's say, and Luís will speak a little bit about the machine learning methodology. Eu já percebi que isto é melhor fazer por aqui, não é? Porque senão vou andar aqui. Pega. É. Isto tem ponteiro, não é? Tem ponteiro, não? Aqui. Okay. So as you know, we are located in the North Atlantic under quite specific and special meteorological conditions due to a specific interaction between the atmosphere, the Atlantic Ocean, and the land on our islands. But we also are under a quite complex geological setting, which is dominated by the interplay of the Eurasian, African, and American lithospheric plates. In fact, the Azores Islands are located here in an area which is quite active concerning seismic activity and volcanic activity, because almost all the seismic and volcanic activity in the Earth occur on the boundary, the plates boundaries, which in our case comes from Gibraltar, Europe, and goes into the mid-Atlantic ridge, crossing the Azores between São Miguel and the Central Group. This is the reason why in these islands we have a quite important seismic activity along a northeast-southeast trend of about 500 kilometers, extending here for about 100 kilometers. Almost all our seismic and volcanic activity is in fact in this area. Flores and Corvo are in a more stable position inside the American plate. This map shows you the seismic activity. Each red dot represents one epicenter. And this map shows you the seismic activity that we had in the Azores since early in the 80s. And this is quite clear. It is quite clear that the seismic activity in this area comes from east of Santa Maria. Santa Maria is here. You cannot see São Miguel, which is just below all these earthquakes. And it crosses all this area and almost ends near the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, which is a quite important tectonic structure that goes from north of Iceland and goes into the south to Bouvet Island. So as you can see also, flows and curves are in a more stable area concerning the seismic activity. In the last year, for instance, we recorded in the Azores about 3,500 earthquakes of low magnitude, of course, but this gives us an average of 10 earthquakes per day. So you can see how strong is the activity in the Azores, not only in magnitude, but also in frequency of events. Since the 15th century, when the islands were settled, we had about 30 big earthquakes in the area with a quite big impact. The first one occurred in the 16th century, in 1522. It was a big earthquake followed by a big landslide, and at that time more than 5,000 people died. You see, we were in the 16th century, so it's a huge amount of people. 5,000 people died in São Miguel Island, where it was the first capital of the Azores, which was Vila Franca do Campo. The most recent earthquake occurred here near Faial, 5 kilometers northeast of Faial Island. It was on July 9th, 1998, and during these earthquakes, some parishes were destroyed more than 80 and 90%. 9 people died, and the destruction was huge, not only due to the fall of houses and monuments, but also due to several landslides that occurred at the same time. Also, since the settlement of the Azores, we had lots of historical eruptions. Again, in the same area, from São Miguel into the central group, the first volcanic eruption recorded was at the same time as São Miguel was settled, so in the middle of the 15th century, and the last volcanic eruptions occurred in 1957, 58, west of Faial, and more recently in 1998, just near Terceira Island, 10 kilometers northeast of Terceira Island. This is a picture of the Capelinhos volcanic eruption. It started as a submarine volcanic eruption, but later on it came into the land. And a small insert also about the 1998-2001 Serreta volcanic eruption, which occurred 10 kilometers northeast of the island where we are now. Not only earthquakes and volcanic eruptions occur in the Azores. We have a permanent degassing, not only due to natural phenomena, but also due to induced seismic and degassing activity. Some of our villages, and this is a picture of Furnas village in São Miguel Island, are located in the spot of high discharges of CO2 and other gases, which are a problem for public health. And the gassing don't occur only on the fumarolic fields, it also occurs in all these fields around where we cannot see and we cannot feel it. The gassing occurs at open space, but sometimes also occur in more closed spaces, indoor of some houses, but here in natural spaces like lava caves, This is a picture of Graciosa Island, Furna do Enxofre, where in August 6, 1992, 2 people died due to high CO2 concentrations. Degassing also occurred induced by man in February 2010 during the geothermal exploitation in São Miguel Island. A problem during a drilling process gave rise to a very high discharge of CO2 and high temperatures that went out for more than 500 meters from the drilling and reached some houses. You see the fields completely destroyed, and some houses are now monitored due to CO2 release inside. Landslides also occur in areas like the Azores, and that is due to the interaction between meteorological and geological factors, but also due to the volcanic constitution of our soils. We have landslides heavy here. This is the most deadly landslide phenomenon that occurred in the Azores. According to the history, it was in 1997, Ribeira Quente. You see some of our villages are in the base of very big cliffs, and in this case, during a very strong storm, more than 30 people died due to a small landslide here that destroyed several houses. It was during the night. Floods are also very common in the Azores. We also have it heavy here. And speaking about floods, we also can speak about tsunamis. They are not so frequent, but also occur in the Azores. Normally due not to earthquakes in the Azorean area, but in Atlantic area. The stronger tsunami that occurred in the Azores was related with the Lisbon earthquake in the 18th century. It had a run-up of about 11 meters here in Terceira. So, this introduction was to let you know why in the Azores University we developed a strong group doing research and monitoring of all these natural hazards. It's a quite complex task, and we can split it in 2 main branches. One is dedicated to field surveys. We try, using detailed field work, we try to understand the geological history of the islands. We try to understand how the volcanoes worked in the past. We try to find out the type of events that we had, each frequency of eruptions and styles, and also the magnitude of those eruptions. The idea, at the end, is try to do some risk analysis, looking to hazards and vulnerability assessment in order to help the public policies regarding either emergency and land use planning. But the second and quite important point is the instrumental monitoring. In fact, volcanoes are like people. We need to watch their behavior every time. We need to look all the signals in order to understand which are the reference levels of their behavior, define what we call the baselines, in order to study the patterns of activity and try to identify some precursory signals. The idea is to have enough information to give field protection data that they can understand and apply and use for their decisions. Of course, to public safety. In the Açores University, we developed in the last 20 years quite important monitoring networks regarding different techniques. And this is because we need to look to each volcano using different and independent techniques in order to cross data from several areas. This is the network of the seismic network of the Azores. It's now composed by about 60 seismic stations of analog and digital signals. All the stations are spread in all the islands of the archipelago, and they collect data continuously. GPS monitoring is also a technique that we use to study ground deformation. All the volcanoes inflate and deflate according to magma movements at depth. So using quite precise GPS, we can understand what is going on, which is the ground deformation around each volcano, and try to integrate that with the seismic information. For instance, it was using the GPS and the seismic network in 2005 that we were able to follow the magma ascent from 8 kilometers depth to 2 kilometers depth between Furnas and Fogo volcano in São Miguel. So just a pre-eruptive stage that we had during a quite important unrest episode in the Azores. So about 40 GPS stations are collecting data in all the archipelago for this goal. Fluid geochemistry is also regarded by our groups not only for degassing for gases, but also in concerning waters in lakes and waters at depth. So we are now running about 60 to 70 stations of volcanic gases, like to measure CO2, radon, and so on, either in gases and in waters. Landslides monitoring is performed taking in account two networks of meteorological stations that are also collecting data every day and sending data to our office. With these meteorological stations, we are using several different sensors, like, of course, raining, but also to measure wind speed, wind directions, and so on, because all those meteorological parameters are quite important to understand the behavior of volcanic gases or ashes if the volcano starts erupting. We also have equipment to measure air quality and physical aspects of volcanic ashes. You probably are aware about the problem that occurred during 2010 with the Icelandic volcano. So we are also members of the International Airspace Network that gives information for all the world about the progressing of clouds in the air, and in this case in the Atlantic space, together with Santa Maria Observatory. All these data from hundreds of stations, from different techniques, are working all the time during all the year, sending information daily, sometimes in a continuous way, to our emergency center, operations center in São Miguel. Here we are collecting all these data. We are performing complex databases, trying to integrate this information, always with the main goal to find out something that can be unusual, that can be different, and that should be the base for an alert or a warning to the civil protection. So what we discussed before this conference was the problem that we have about understanding all this data. Try to find out different ways to look to this data. And in fact, as Professor said before, we are speaking about a quite complex system. Volcanoes are very complex, as you know. We are speaking about uncertainty because we have lots of data, but we need to understand the data. We need to try to find out what's the meaning of that data. And we also deal with a problem which is the incompleteness, because we cannot have all the equipment in all the volcanoes that we would like to have. Finally, we are just looking to a very short window. We have instrumentation in the Azores for about 20 years, but the Azores have several millions of years of history. So we don't know exactly which is the part of the window that we are looking at. So all these big problems are problems that we are dealing with all the days, and that Luis spoke that can be improved, at least using some techniques related with artificial intelligence. So I will ask now Luis if he can explain us how. Thank you.
I will talk briefly how the machine learning can help to understand more deeply the activity of volcanoes. What we want to do is very trivial tasks. Pattern recognition, prediction, classification, having in mind the uncertainty. For what? For assist in decision making of scientists and stakeholders, particularly the civil protection authorities in the Azores. So, what is the challenge? Is to increase the usefulness of our data set for scientific purposes and risk assessment and mitigation, like Jean-Louis said before. How can artificial intelligence help in these tasks? We believe that artificial intelligence can help volcanologists to understand the behavior of volcanoes for risk assessment and mitigations. In our group, this is a novelty. We study several approaches in artificial intelligence and decided to explore firstly the application of methodologies and techniques of machine learning. Again, we believe that it may clarify the significance in monitoring the data and improve the decision makings of scientists and stakeholders. Just because machine learning uses data sets as a training set to training models, and use the four learning strategies to understand the dynamic of some aspects of volcanoes activity. We think nowadays that's the most appropriate approach to do our job. I would like to emphasize three approaches: artificial neural networks, evolutionary computation, particularly genetic algorithms and genetic programming, and finally to measure uncertainty, fuzzy systems. But probably there will be other approaches under consideration. So we would like to receive our comments, our ideas, our criticisms to enhance more deeply our idea in use machine learning in understanding the activity of volcanoes. Thank you.
Can we return, please?
Yeah, that was a wonderful talk. Oh, do I need this? Maybe not. Yeah. So thank you so much for your wonderful talk. And I was delighted to see that you are using, and considering using AI techniques for conservation. I had a specific talk about one of your plots, the species rank plot. That was a log-log plot, correct? A log-log. Were you implying that the distribution is non-standard? It looked a bit like a power law.
In fact, we are now we have a paper where we are comparing different type of distributions: the zero-sum neutral distribution, the power log normal distribution, and also the Gambling model that is based in a binomial distribution. And we are seeing that depending of the scale, there could be different models that could apply to the data. And we are now investigating also different taxonomic groups, plants, insects, and of course, different models could be have a better fit with different, but the Gambling model, that is a recent model, is performing better than, for instance, the neutral models or the log normal models. But it's a very interesting field that we are submitting now papers on this kind of.
So it seems that indeed it's heavy-tailed.
What?
It does seem to be heavy, the distribution seems to be heavy-tailed.
Yes, yes. There are many rare species in the Veil line is huge, in more diverse islands like La Réunion or Canary Islands, but in the Azores, where we have a dominance of common species, usually we can have a geometric series with the dominance of common species. But of course, when you add species, you increase the proportion of rare species in the system.
But the plots were for Azores or?
We have plots, now we have plots in the Azores, Canary Islands, La Réunion, but most of our work is in the Azores. Pedro Cardoso also have plots in Portugal mainland, and also in Madeira Island, Madeira, Spain. And we are trying now to compare different locations, different taxonomic groups, to find statistical regularities in the data, or if the variation is due to trophic groups or spatial scale. It's a very interesting topic. And also, one of the problems now is related with variation in total abundance of individuals. Pedro started developing a way to have rarefaction data, has the same number of individuals in each meta-community, and and also the total number of species could influence in the species abundance distribution.
You mean models for species distribution, to infer the distribution and abundance of species?
Yes, yes.
Very good. Oh, excellent. I hope you are going to be here for my talk.
Yes, I will be.
This was not meant to be a plug to my talk, but indeed I'm so impressed how well planned this conference was. This is very good. Thank you. I had also well, but maybe somebody else has another question, and I'll get back to.
In the use, you know what I mean, because we have a minimal size of fishing. This puts some evolutionary pressure on the fishes. Are fishes getting smaller? Can we notice this? It's just a curiosity. It's not really a question.
Yes, this is one of the consequences of the fish exploitation. Is the fishes become smaller and smaller and smaller. And these have other implications for all the stock. For example, females start to breed earlier in their lives. The quality of the eggs are worse than the big females, etc. This is, but yes, for some species, yes. And there is a very famous work from Daniel Pauly from British Columbia University that is what we call going down the trophic web. That means that in early fishing we catch almost the top predators, the big fishes, and a long time with the overexploitation, the fishes we start to catch the smaller species, with less valuable species, and the species that are near the base of the trophic web of the marine environment. Yes.
It was a very interesting set of presentations, and in fact, this way to try to make the bridge to AI raised several questions from my side. I'm going to try to be short in the ones I asked, but in particular for Guy Menezes and João Luís Gaspar, you have data banks of fish pictures and all the sensors that collect data from the geological information. Do you record that? Do you have, I suppose, huge data banks that can be exploited? Because I think many of my colleagues here, especially the ones interested in data mining, would be very eager to put their hands on such an amount of data, and therefore many possibilities are open for that, or would be open. I'm not sure. That's my question.
Any more questions? Carla, do you want?
Oh, so. I think actually these volcanoes and earthquakes, an area that is basically what it's referred as inverse optimization problems, this is an example that those techniques were pioneered to study the trajectories. I'm not sure, I believe this was with the earthquakes, where basically you are trying to, you know the trajectory and you are trying to infer the intensity of the earthquakes, etc. This is called inverse optimization. Therefore, I thought maybe areas such inverse reinforcement learning, etc., would be a very interesting area to exploit for this. But this is actually a beautiful example of an inverse problem. In fact, it is the well-known shortest path problem, which we love. Well, the inverse problem is actually you have the path, and now you are trying to infer the intensity along the edges. And interestingly and beautifully, the inverse of a shortest path is still a shortest path. So I thought perhaps could be a good pointer for your research. I also, along the same question as Louise had for the data sets for the fisheries, that's yet obviously an amazing area of research. In fact, indeed, you know, the calamities and what we see over the last, I don't know, 100 years or 50 years, the reduction in terms of fish stocks is dramatic. So this is quite an important area of research. And indeed, are you planning to have the data available? That's a question. And I had I was thinking, is that I'm not sure if the fishermen will be a bit reluctant to using these techniques, because maybe I imagine there are rules that they are not supposed to fish baby fish, and this may, you know, reveal that they are actually fishing baby fish. I'm speculating. Do you see that may be an issue?
Not much. You know, nowadays most of the fishing fleets are controlled. They have already cameras on board in several places of the boat. It's called the CCTV techniques. They are obligated to have that on board in many fisheries. I'm talking about vessels, big vessels. The problem of the discard of small fish, it's a problem. Other problem is the bycatch. It's what they catch. They have a target species and they catch a lot of other non-target species. And most of the times they reject the other species. They are not interested. And this is also, the bycatch problem is also a problem. But as I said, the big vessels are very controlled nowadays, and I believe to put this kind of systems on board is not anymore a problem. They have already observers on board that do this job by hand. This is only a question of substitute a ruler by a camera to do the job.
Yeah, the system, I think it's an amazing idea, and I hope you succeed implementing it. Very good.
Regarding the images and the data, I'm open to if someone would like to work that images of the fishes. For me, it's no problem for me.
Actually, another comment is crowdsourcing. You know, that would be an amazing way for you to get, you know, even species identification.
Crowdsourcing and something that I said before. There is an article by a journalist of Washington Post yesterday in the part 2 of Público about the work of Sky Truth. Perhaps is interesting for both of you. There is ideas that the journalist, when describing the work of John Amos, goes through that. I said that apart machine learning, socio-simulation would be nice, not only on risk analysis and prediction, but also connected with disaster management, because when seeing the data that you put on about volcanoes, there is some pattern there, perhaps some points that are more predicted than others, and that could help to play an active role. That means go also to game theory and avoid what is happening in the continent with fires in August, with more than 200 fires a day. You said earthquakes. There was no big number than 200, but 200 a day is too huge to play around. Which?
Well, maybe some people here are not familiar with the idea of social simulation, so maybe I can say something about this. I also take the time to make some publicity on the track we're having next Thursday on that. The idea of social simulation is mainly, especially agent-based social simulation, which is the one we are going to deal with, is mainly to acknowledge that people will do things that are not rationally predicted. If we define rationality as the usual rationality to do what's the right thing for some external entity that always knows what the right thing is. The thing is, maybe I can just use the Herbert Simon sentence that people have reasons for what they do. And so when they use those reasons, what emerges out of collectively, the behavior that collectively emerges is kind of unpredictable, because any one of us will not recognize that the other guy is being rational. He's being rational for himself and not for what is expected to be. And so the result is very complex and difficult to predict. We can expect a bunch of fish to behave in a certain way, even collectively, from some very small interactions and sets of rules, and this has been simulated in computer science terms. But people are more unpredictable than that, and the sum of all those unpredictabilities can lead to very strange behavior that is not usually very well dealt with by traditional systems. And that's the idea of social simulation, facing this realistically, instead of just hoping that everyone behave, looking how they do behave and then taking it from that.